At McDonald's, she's like, there's three types of people that come here. One like you who eats, one who works here, and one person who owns this place. That's called an investor. And she taught me that day how to buy stock in McDonald's. She put her hands on me and she said, David, I wish for you all the dreams that you wish for yourself. And she went through the 5 very specific regrets she had. And she said, my lesson to you is not in those 5 regrets. My lesson to you is, why do I have them?
Hi, this is Ariane, and welcome to another episode of The Spirit Collective, where I talk to remarkable people about a side of their lives they rarely talk about, their spiritual path. It's time for a different conversation. Welcome to The Spirit Collective. My guest today, at one point, had the best-selling book in the world. How cool is that for an achievement? He's a 10 times New York Times best-selling author known for The Automatic Millionaire, Smart Women Finish Rich, and The Latte Factor, making him one of the most trusted voices in personal finance globally. But David will tell you himself, it was never really about the money. What makes him perfect for this podcast is what lives beneath the financial advice. He meditates, journals, practices yoga, is very generous, and maintains a daily gratitude practice, saying that part of having your feet on the ground now is having some sort of meditation and a daily practice. Most powerfully, he believes that everyone is given a higher power from above and that most people don't tap into it because they're consumed with anxiety and stress about money. His whole philosophy is rooted in values, not numbers. He says the whole reason to secure yourself financially is to find a level of freedom in your life, and that is his mission, to share goodness forward. I personally met David a few years ago, actually many years ago, I think it's a few decades at this point, at a Tony Robbins event. He was a VIP guest and a speaker. We've become friends and even had the pleasure of skiing together very recently here in Switzerland. I'm so excited to see where money and spirituality overlap in this episode. David, welcome to the Spirit Collective.
All right, first of all, that was so gorgeous. I feel like I could just close the laptop right now and we could be done. Thank you so much. It was a great show. You're amazing. It's so good. It's so good to see you. I know it's sort of a shame because we were together 2 weeks ago in Verbier, but I wish that we were doing this face to face. But this is close, so it's great to be with you.
Close. So David, I have so many amazing questions. Some I hope that you've probably never been asked before. So we'll see where this goes. But I want to start with where it started for you. Were you raised in a spiritual tradition? Were you raised with values? Were you raised in a particular religion? And how has that evolved throughout the years?
You know, no one's ever asked me that question. So that is interesting because you just described my morning practice, which a lot of people say they do these things, but they don't always really do them. Like, I've already meditated this morning. I've journaled this morning. I've done my gratitude process. I've sent out some notes to people saying good job to them. Like I have a process. But I wasn't necessarily raised with that process. But as I say, I wasn't really raised with that process, meaning like we didn't necessarily talk about God at home. It wasn't, I was raised Jewish. Um, I was raised with very positive parents. I was exposed to motivational things. Like, it's interesting because we met at Tony Robbins, right? And my father gave me, back in the day when there were audio cassettes, my dad gave me like the classic 6-box cassettes of like a Dennis Waitley and a Brian Tracy. And so I would listen to those. Ironically, because we're skiers, I would listen to those audio cassettes on the way to Tahoe. So that one thing that my parents did, which was exposing me to, motivation, and my dad was very successful in business, and I grew up watching my dad teaching investment classes because that's how my father built his business. That had an impact on me at a very young age because I started reading motivational books in college. I read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I read Think and Grow Rich. And it really started me on the journey of self-development. But I think my spiritual self-development took place later. I think it took place more in my 30s and my 40s and my 50s. And yet, if I go all the way back to really early in life, I had a deep spiritual connection with God. And I really, it's almost hard to explain, but I felt like God was watching over me all the time. Like, it gives me chills to say that. And I was hit by a car in front of my high school at 16, right before I turned 16. And it was a horrible accident. And I flew, like, say, like 75 feet. I was on a moped and I hit this car head on right at the intersection. And I was not knocked unconscious. And I was laying on the ground and my legs were in pieces like a Gumby doll. And I remember looking up and being like, wait a minute, God, like, what just happened here? Right. And I actually had a moment in time, well, a long time, because I was in the hospital for a long time. I had ultimately, it took 6 operations to be able to walk again. And I went away from God because I was like, in that time frame, I went away from God because I was like, there must not, you must not be here because you would never let this happen to me. And I had like the number one orthopedic surgeon, maybe in the world, but certainly in California, work on me. It's the reason why I'm able to still ski. Like, I was supposed, they said any other doctor would have amputated my left ankle. So my ankle was completely shattered. My left femur was broken. My right fibula and tibia was broken. I had 27 pieces of metal put in me and 6 surgeries, and it took a year of physical therapy. And my doctor, his name was Mel Barrere, Dr. Mel Barrere, he was very spiritual. And he would say, God's been watching over you every step of this. And I would lie in bed and think like, no, he hasn't, or this wouldn't have happened. Later, I had an awakening, which was like, wait a minute, he was totally watching over me. I mean, I could have easily have died. When I hit the ground, a car missed hitting me on my head by inches. And so,
Feels-
when I play it back, got further through the process and started playing it back, I was like, oh my God, he's been watching over me the whole time. So, I don't know, that's a pretty powerful story that really transformed my life because what would happen to me is when you go through something so difficult like that at a young age, and I was on an orthopedic floor for months, and I had a nurse. She was like an angel. She came and took me on a tour around the floor because another doctor, not the doctor that had operated on me, but another doctor came into my room and he looked at the clipboard. And in my room had pictures of skiers because all I wanted to do is build ski. I'm 15. I was supposed to go to Tahoe to go skiing. Now I've had this accident. All I want to know is, can I ski? And the doctor looked at me and said, no. I said, will I be able to ski this season? He's like, ski this season, son, you're never going to ski again. You're not even going to run. Hopefully you'll walk, but you're going to walk with a limp for the rest of your life. And then he left, and he left the hospital room, and I am bawling. And this nurse comes in and goes, what do you need? Because I mean, I was on like all these drugs. I mean, are you bleeding? And I'm sobbing, and I tell her what happened. And she closed the door of that hospital room, and she's like, listen, he's a very good doctor, but he has a horrible bedside manner, and he doesn't know what you can do. No one knows what you can do. She goes, God knows what you can do. And tomorrow I'm going to take you on a tour of this floor. And then he put me in a wheelchair. It's a hard thing for me to just get in a wheelchair at that point. So she puts me in a wheelchair and she takes me on a tour of the floor. And takes me by some of these rooms where people are on the verge of dying and much worse than me. And she says, you know what? You're young. You can get better. There are people here who are not leaving. And so today is your wake up call to start tomorrow on your plan. And she's like, we're going to start you in physical therapy tomorrow. And then when your doctor, Mel Barrera, comes in, he's the orthopedic surgeon for the Warriors. You tell him you want a sports therapist, whose name was Steve DeLuca. And you tell him that you want the same people that work on the Warriors team. And, ultimately I would go and work with these people for a year. So how's the long answer to your question? Uh,
Incredible. So, David, just if you had to summarize, how did your relationship to God change in that moment? How was it a spiritual awakening? Was it a gift? Was it what, because so many people can relate, not necessarily to the accident, but to something really hard, bad, tragic that has happened in their life. Some people check out exactly of their relationship or connection to something greater, whatever it is they call it. What would you tell them?
I think God's watching over everyone, and I think God's inside all of us. I think all of us have a part of God in us. Like one of the great, beautiful truths that you find when you go into deep meditation is that you return back to yourself. You return back to the love of yourself, and that inside of us, we're all energy. I mean, these are things that you and I deeply believe, right? But we're energy that just happens to be in a body, matter to matter, right? So we have this incredibly unique miracle moment in time where we got to be in these bodies. We're energy that got to be here. It's the ultimate miracle that we're alive, and we're all connected. And so how are we connected? Well, we're connected by source and a higher power. And I think sometimes people get lost in the word. Like, chances are anybody's listening to this podcast, they're not lost in it, right? Because they're here because this is what they believe, they're interested in this. Maybe someone will forward this show to somebody who's not believing right now. But I think what happens in life is that when you return to source, it is the most beautiful place that you can ever be. And most of our life, no matter how much we work on being spiritually connected, tied into source, do all the things that we do, we still get disconnected. I still get disconnected. I can start off grounded, and then all of a sudden downstairs there's a construction project, and I'm like on my phone, like, I'm about to do a podcast in 17 minutes. Could you please stop hammering for the next hour? Right. That's my moment where I have to, okay, but do it in a loving way, do it in a loving way. So I think that everyone is connected to source, and that at any moment in time, you, you just, you're there. You just need to wake up back to it again.
And for someone who's listening who's like, I don't feel connected to source, what do you think's the easiest way to start?
I think people connect to source often when they're in nature. At least for me, and everyone's nature experience is different. Like you and I love skiing. There's something for me about skiing that I get lost in the moment, and I am totally present, and I am in awe of the beauty that I'm experiencing. Skiing is one of the few things that does that for me in the same way. But I can go for a walk. Like, I'm going to get done with this podcast with you, and I'm going to go for a walk in the hills of Tuscany. I'm here in Florence, and I can go for a beautiful walk for 45 minutes and have that spiritual moment. Now, I can also go for a walk and completely be disconnected and be thinking about my to-do list or listening to music. And I know that there's different experiences, right? So one of the things I do when I go on my walk, for example, in Florence, is I have these benches they're benches, they're stairs. I sit on the stairs at Piazza Michelangelo. So I do a loop. Anybody's been to Florence will know where this is. And it's a spot that overlooks Florence. And I do this most mornings where I do my walk, and then I sit on these steps and I just take it in. And sometimes if my wife goes for a walk with me, I'll want to sit on these steps. And she's like, do we have to sit on the steps? I'm like, yeah, yeah, I need my 3 minutes to sit on these steps and just like look at the beauty of Florence. And I think anyone can do that. I think, like, if you're listening to this podcast, when the podcast is over, go for a walk with yourself with no music on and take in your environment and have a moment of awe where you really look around. If you just sit on a bench for an hour and don't look at your phone and don't talk to anybody and watch the birds go by, I mean, you can have these moments that are just like, wow. And I don't think people do enough of that.
Well, we've had guests on the podcast who've they haven't necessarily been spiritual in traditional sense, but they speak to awe and wonder and beauty and being present in exactly what you're talking about. So I feel like it's people do get lost in the word, and the entry point or the door that you take is so personal. It's the one that makes sense for you. And David, I mean, your story about your accident, I sometimes hear and I see that people have accidents a little bit as a moment of choice and moment of decision and a moment of awakening. And I can, for people who don't know David, you're an incredible skier. Like I would never have known that was in your past, and that was and, we 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 walk with people, we work with people, we are friends with people, and we don't necessarily know the journey that's gotten them there, and we certainly sometimes don't know their inner journey. So I wanna switch to, something that I read, which is that you seem to have had 2 amazing grandmothers who coincidentally, I think were both called Rose, correct me
Hmm.
if I'm wrong, who
Yeah.
seem to have been great kind of guides early on, to go back to the early decision making, and the early guidance. They seem more like they were in some ways spiritual guides in your life. Can you tell us a little bit about them and how helpful they were to sort of set you on your path?
Oh, I would love to. I can talk about my grandmother for hours. So I had two grandma roses. I'll start with my mom's mom because I have an enormously positive mother, and she had an enormously positive mother. It's interesting. I think positivity is a gift that can be passed on. So is negativity. But I happen to be in a family that was very positive. My mom is my dad passed away 2 years ago. My mom is a living testimony to how to live your life fully. She's continued to live her life 100% fully. She's always, Mom, I love you. I'll send this to her. She'll watch it. She's, my biggest supporter. But my mom's always positive, and she's never complains, and she's always upbeat, and she just went and got a piano after not playing piano for like 40 years, and she's 85 playing piano again. She's made new friends in her senior living community. And I think if I go back to her mom was the same way. And that grandma Rose lived to be, I think she lived to be 96, and she was always upbeat. And on her, basically her deathbed, the last time I got to see her, she said something to me that I think is the greatest thing you can ever say to anyone. She put her hands on me, and she said, "David, I wish for you all the dreams that you wish for yourself." It still fills me up with so much peace, love, and joy feeling. And I say that to people all the time. Like, I love saying that, because it's true. Like, if you can wish for people all the dreams that they wish for themselves, what more can you ask for? Like, that's what I want for my kids. I want for my kids all the dreams that they wish for themselves. Not my dreams. I want the dreams that they wish for themselves. I want that same for the people that I love. So that's that grandmother, which is pretty beautiful. And then my dad's mom was like my ultimate mentor. She's the one who taught me how to invest. I mean, she's the one who gave me so many insanely major life lessons. She started with nothing. She was a broke salesperson at Gimbals who sold wigs. My grandmother did Both my grandmothers didn't have a college education. My dad's mom didn't have a college education. His dad didn't have a college education. They were blue collar people living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with nothing. And at 30, my grandmother was like, you know what, this isn't working. I'm tired of being broke, and made a decision in her life to change. And the change she decided to make is that she'd start saving 50 cents a week out of their paychecks, and they would start learning how to invest the money. And over her lifetime, literally her whole lifetime, she became a self-made millionaire. And then she taught my dad how to invest. He became a financial advisor. She taught me and my sister. We both became financial advisors. But she started teaching me about money at age 7, and she taught me about money at McDonald's. And at McDonald's, she's like, "I'm gonna teach you how to be rich today. You always want to play Monopoly. I'm gonna teach you, David, how to play Monopoly for real." And I told you this with your son. And she's like, at McDonald's, my favorite restaurant back then, she's like, "There's three types of people that come here. One like you who eats, You're called a consumer. You're just spending money. One who works here, they're working here. They're earning minimum wage. Tough way to make a living. And one person who owns this place. That's called an investor. And the investor is somebody who owns stock. And she taught me that day how to buy stock in McDonald's. And that single lesson completely changed my life. Because at the age of 7, she taught me to think like an investor. When she took me to Disneyland at 9 years old, I was like, Grandma, is this place publicly traded? She's like, go ask Mickey Mouse, you know? And I bought my second share of stock in McDonald's. I mean, not McDonald's, in Disney. And it's funny. Wait, hold on a second. I'll show you. Stay right there.
Sure.
I'm going to show you. I mean, it's funny because I happen to be in my son's room. I'm going to come back here. No, but you're not supposed to do things like this
No,
on a
we
show.
like
But it happens to be because my son's headed to college. This is what I did for my son. That's a Disney. What am I looking at? That's a Walt Disney stock certificate.
yeah.
So I did the same lesson for my sons, and then we framed these so they would like, that's a share of stock. Now you own Disney. And he had McDonald's, and I did the same thing with my kids. Only, they also own things like Shake Shack and Amazon, and but the lessons of realizing at a young age that you can participate in the wealth that you are a part of. Because as she taught me as a kid, like, you're always going to be spending money. You should own the companies that you spend money at, right? Like, everybody uses Amazon. Everybody should have been buying Amazon, right? But if you buy, I teach people to buy index funds, and I teach people how to invest automatically. But either you're participating in the wealth that's being created, or you're simply the one who's a part of the system. I always say, everyone has a plan for your money. And this is what another lesson from my grandmother. Everybody has a plan for your money. And if you don't have a plan for your money, somebody else has a plan for your money. You need to have a plan for your money. And so many of my money lessons came from my grandmother. The first book, Smart Women Finish Rich, is a result of my grandmother, because she was ahead of her time, managing the money, teaching the family. And so I really wanted to pass her life lessons on to other women around the world. That's what started my career.
And I love that, two, if not three, including your mother, you've had three extraordinary women around you. And so much of the times we think that, men are better at money, and actually you have the complete opposite experience. So I love that part. Do you still feel guided by them now that they're past? Do you feel their presence? Do you feel that they're still with you?
It's such a beautiful thing to say. Yes, of course, all the time. But there are specific moments, right? Like if you look at it, one of the moments that changed my life, when I put out Smart Women Finish Rich was my first book, and I tell all the stories about my grandmother. So she's kind of always with me because I'm always telling my grandma Bach stories. And it's been beautiful to share her legacy now for over 30 years. I've been doing this work now for 33 years. So I've been talking about my grandmothers in these classes from 33 years ago. I can't, my grandmother knew the book was almost done. My grandmother passed away before the book came out, but I had finished the book. And, so I think, God, it's kind of beautiful, like, that her story has been going out there for now 3 decades and touching other generations. But I had a moment where I was on The View with Barbara Walters, and what was supposed to be like a 3 or 4 minute segment turned into like an 8-minute segment. She just kept going and going and like, I mean, it's just her show, right? So she was amazing, and she's just chatting with me. We're having like this incredible connection, and it was like I was with my grandmother. And when the show was over, we went backstage, and she's like, "You were fantastic," and I'm like, "Oh my God, you like, if only my grandmother had been here. You remind me of my grandmother. You should have loved you." And she's like, "Oh, sweetheart, your grandmother was here." And she's like, she was here. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing to say. And then Barbara says to me, "You're really good. You should really do this." And I was living in San Francisco. She's like, "You should do this more." And I called my wife from the car and said, you met my wife, Michelle, at the time. I said, Barbara Walters just told me I should do this, like, really do this. And she's like, "Well, maybe you should really do this." And that was the decision. That was the trigger that made me decide to leave. Part of the trigger that made me decide to leave Morgan Stanley, move from San Francisco to New York on a wing and a prayer to go do this more, to try to teach millions of people. And I had not written The Automatic Millionaire, the book that is like the wrap up tour here, this book for its 20-year anniversary edition. I wrote this book once I got to New York, and I went out to teach millions of people, and then ultimately this book got launched on Oprah. And me moving to New York, like Barbara said, once you're here, you'll be on these shows all the time. That's what changed everything. And I was on the Today Show and CNN and Fox and CNBC and CBS, and um, so I have those moments where I feel like yes, my grandmothers are watching over me.
Yeah. Feels like there was a orchestration to some of the big choice moments, I think, of your life. I mean, one of the things I want to say is, this is actually my son's book. My son is 12 years old, and I'm honestly, I'm
Personally
so
signed for him.
personally signed. Yep. I am eternally grateful because I feel like you have set him on a path that, will be different. And, he's 12 years old. He's on page 183 of the book. He reads this, every night before bed. And I think that when you teach the younger generation, the gift that you're passing on is extraordinary. So he's got a stock account. He's doing exactly what you're telling him. He is not sure whether he should buy Bitcoin or gold right now. That's a decision that he's trying to make.
Neither.
Neither.
Neither, okay? Neither. So he needs to really read the book, because I will say neither. He needs to be buying a basic index fund like the Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund with 3,600 stocks. He starts with that. He does not need to be buying gold. He does not need to be buying Bitcoin.
Great.
Please tell him, Uncle Dave, no gold, no Bitcoin. First, you start with a basic index fund, 3,600 stocks, totally diversified. Then you
Beautiful.
add a global fund to it. And then, VTI and VEA, that's where he starts. Those are the symbols to the two funds listed in the book.
Good, great. David, just to wrap up your grandmother, one of the things I also read was that one of them told you that every regret she had in her life was because she had taken the safe route. Um, can you unpack that for us? What is the safe route versus what is it? The wild route, the intuitive route, the obvious route?
This is a beautiful story. So my grandmother was on her deathbed. Sadly, she'd had a stroke. We've flown her from Laguna Beach to the Bay Area. We put her. She's in a nursing home. And again, the first book, Smart Woman Finish Rich, was basically done. I didn't know my grandmother was going to pass away. I thought my grandmother was going to be fine. Like, I didn't know that was going to be the end. And I asked my grandmother, I'm like, Grandma, the book's done. Is there any last? It's filled with all your life lessons. Is there any other life lessons you want to share? And she's like, No. You know what? I've given you all my life lessons. You're in great shape. And I happened to ask her a question, which was, does she have any regrets? And she said no. And then she told me why she didn't have any regrets. And I said, that's amazing. And then the next morning I came to see her, and, Grandma, how'd you sleep? And she said, terrible. I said, well, what do you mean? She's like, I was up all night thinking about all my regrets. And I was like, oh my God, I'm sorry. And then she said, so my last life lesson is I want to go through them with you. And then she went through her regrets, like 5. And she started all the way back at age 17. And she went through the 5 very specific regrets she had. And she said, my lesson to you is not in those 5 regrets. My lesson to you is, why do I have them? And she said, I have those 5 regrets because at all 5 points in my life, I came to a fork in the road. And there were 2 choices. I could take the road that had risk, and I could take the safe road. And she's like, at all 5 points, I took the safe road. And she said, what happened to me, and it will happen to you, and it will happen to everybody that you meet. She said, there's 2 people inside of you. She goes, there's the young David, the young you that wants to take the risk. And, yeah, let's go do this. And she said, then there's going to be the big David. I said, no, let's not do this. Let's take the safe road. And she's like, it's not always your own voice. She's like, the big David could be like your parents, society, your friends telling you, do this, it's safer. And she said, so in my case, all 5 times I didn't listen to the little girl inside of me. I listened to the big girl. I didn't take the risk. And so she said to me, if I can give you one last lesson, she's like, you're young. I was in my 20s. She's like, when you come to the fork in the road, because you will, and you'll come to it more than once, let the little boy come out and play. And I said, okay. And I drove back to my office. My office was in Orinda. And I drove back to the office in Orinda Theater Square. And I was in my beautiful Jaguar. And I had all the things you're supposed to have, working at Morgan Stanley, senior vice president, hugely successful career. And I broke down crying in my car. And I looked in the rearview mirror because my little boy wanted to leave Morgan Stanley and go spend my life teaching people to be smarter with money. And my big boy was like, that's insane. Your life is set. You've worked for, you've made it. Now you should just enjoy this time. And I looked in the rearview mirror and said, okay, in 3 years, we're getting you out of here. And I worked on a 3-year plan. And then I let my little boy come out and play. And that was also part of moving to New York. And so, yeah, that was a real gift that she gave me, that laugh. And I've shared that lesson a lot actually in speeches and podcasts and even in the Latte Factor book I wrote. I tell her story at the end of the book. And it's interesting because I'm sitting here with you. You know, this is I'm telling you, this is my wrap up tour. I decided one last time to put this book out one more time because I wanted it for our kids. We've got these younger kids now, and I've got younger kids. I got a 22-year-old and a 16-year-old. I wanted to be able to help the next generation be smarter with their money. I'm like, okay, I'll do this one more time. And now I'm sitting here, in a beautiful place in Florence, Italy, and I'm asking myself, well, what does my little boy want to go do? You know, this has been that journey for me. I'm not even sure, but I know my little boy wants to play and do something new. And I want to meet the next version of me in 10 years. Which, oh my God, Aaron, you sent me the podcast we did 16 years ago.
Yes, I did.
I listened to it. I actually
Yes,
listened to it like 2 days ago. And we did a phenomenal, this was before podcast for podcast. We did a phenomenal show.
it's
And
incredible.
I listened to that show and I was like, wow, I'm saying that I'm still teaching the exact same thing. But that's because it's a timeless message. And I'm like, and that's also why I'm finishing teaching this. I'm not going to keep teaching this another 10 more years. And I'm going to go let my little boy come out and play to do the next conversation. I was excited to do this show with you because it's a new kind of conversation.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, just for people listening, I used to have a podcast called Change Nation where I interviewed people like David 16 years ago. It's extraordinary that it was happened that far back. So we'll post that on the show notes too, which is the other episode. David, I wanted to ask you, you are a deeply spiritual man, and I feel like it is important for people to hear from other men so that they have permission in some ways to come out of the spiritual closet, to sort of to own it, to say that they do meditate or they do yoga or they do practice gratitude journals. Why do you think it's still so hard for people who, successful? Why is it so hard for them to speak about this part of their journey? I mean, it is not hard for you. You were right there in the first minute that we started. What makes it easy for you? Why are you different? Because this is not normal. It's not mainstream. And I feel like the hope is that it becomes so much more of a mainstream conversation. But why is it easy for you? What would you tell other people?
I want to ask you that question and I'll answer. Why do you think it's easier for you?
That's a great question. I think that my whole life I've had kind of these two worlds. I've been successful, right? I was in media, venture capital, MBAs. Like I've had that external shine, and it hasn't quite filled me up the same way that the internal shine has. And as you know, I started doing personal growth and spirituality in my teens, which was early at the time, just to sort of find some magic and hope and possibility. But I always thought they were two worlds. So I had to kind of hide them from each other. I hid them when I was dating, I hid them when I was working. And there came a time at around 30 where I was like, I cannot be two people. And so they just aligned. They aligned, and I did quit a big job in New York City, and I did break off an engagement, And I was just like, "Oh, I can't carry both separately anymore." So I'm out. I mean, look at the podcast I'm doing, right? It's like this is a big part of who I am, and there's no shame, there's magic in it, there's wonder in it, and the internal has massively helped the external. So for me, it's like no time to waste. It's like it's just the truth and the authenticity is what matters to me. Not how you take it, or people might go, she's a bit weird, or she, talks about this stuff. It's more I'm whole, I'm aligned. But I want to hear
I
from
love.
you. What do you
Well,
think?
I think it's so beautiful, and you and I had this gorgeous conversation over an incredible Mexican dinner in Verbier, and you told me about the podcast, and we had like a really deep spiritual conversation, right? And you looked at me and you're like, God, this was amazing, right? And I think we both left that dinner very filled up, right? Like our buckets were filled from a real, true spiritual conversation, and we got closer as a result of that too, right?
And the part of
And
us, we didn't know that about each other. We've known each other 25 years. We had not gone to that level of conversation. And it's so refreshing. It's so
oh, it's so refreshing, and our souls want it, right? And I had a guys trip coming up, and you said to me, I had 9 guys, 9 of my buddies from Florence coming to Verbier to ski with me. I organize a ski trip every year, and I create this experience. And you're like, well, you should try having one of these kind of conversations with your buddies, right? And I always intentionally create conversation starters. Um, and I did create a couple conversation starters to try to go deeper and spiritual. And I think most of us want to have those deeper conversations. But I don't know that everybody's been there yet. I think one of the things that is hard for people like us is that once you go to this place where you start having these more real conversations, I find it unbearable to have these shallow social bullshit experiences where you're just like, oh my God, like another dinner where I'm going to sit there for 3 hours and talk about what do you do? Blah, where'd you go to school? Why are you here? Like, uh, you know, and it's funny. It's almost like the airplane situation, right? People will sit down in an airplane and talk to a stranger, and sometimes for 5 hours, like tell everything because they're never going to see that person again, right? And then they'll go, they'll be on the plane to go see their best friends, and then they'll have for 3 days not a single real deep conversation. And I've always really been somebody who's tried to have these deeper conversations because I don't want to have shallow friendships, and I don't want it, especially now. Like I'm very I've always worried about running out of time. I've lived my life like if I only have a few years left to live, what do I want to get? What do I want to do? Who do I want to be? How do I want to live? And you start to get older and you think about it even more and more. So I just want to live a very conscious life, and I would love to just be surrounded by people that I can have this conversation with, but that's not always easy to do. It's one thing to go to a yoga retreat, you meet these people, and then you go back to the real world, and then it's like, well, how do I keep having more real conversations with people? I think everybody wants them. I just think that we don't know how to do it. And I think a show like what you're creating here is an opportunity for people to start going, yeah, I'd like to do that. Now, I don't know if I'm the expert in telling you how to have deep conversations, but I think sometimes it just starts with being, authentic and open and honest.
So with the guys, with the 8 guys, what was a conversation starter?
Well, one of the questions I asked is, what do you think happens when you die? Right? Like, because
Yes.
it's it.
What happens when you die? What do you think happens when you die?
Well, I'm not sure, right? Like, but I think that our energy and our soul lives on and goes back to source. I don't think it's just over. I just think it goes back. But that's not what I thought 30 years ago. That's what I've evolved to. But it's interesting, if what do you think happens? Everybody's sort of got some kind of an idea, even if they're not sure. Well, I think nothing happens. I think this happens. I think, I'm going to see everybody I love. Like, um, but that's a pretty real conversation. Also, then why do you think that?
And does it change how you live your life knowing that?
I don't know if it changed how I live my life because I think that I've always lived my life like this is, back in the day when we were young, and the older people, younger people won't know what the hell we're talking about. But when you were young, if you went to Disneyland, they used to have tickets for the rides. And an e-ticket took you on the best ride. And you would get a stack of these tickets. And then once your e-tickets were gone, you had to go to the next level ride. So e-tickets were the best ticket. And I remember thinking, like, life is the ultimate e-ticket. Like we have the ultimate e-ticket. And the question is, do we use it every day? And look, some days you wake up and you just are not in an e-ticket mood, right? But like in today's the last day and you don't use your e-ticket, you know, well shit, that would suck, So I think I try to have way more better days than bad days. And I will say I've tried to also now acknowledge when I'm having a bad day. Like, I've been accused of even with my family of being a Pollyanna and too positive. Um And part of that's like a habit, and like now, like that, like I've been sick the last couple weeks, and I've been honest with my family. Like, yeah, I don't feel great. I've been tired. I don't always need all these drugs. It's a nightmare. Um, but I'm at least able to be honest about that, and also honest about that with myself. Like, okay, you need to relax a little bit right now.
So, David, you have a bad day. What's your practice to feel better?
Well, again, it goes right back to the habits in the morning. Like, what did I do this morning? I meditated. Now, today I did a morning meditation. I used Joe Dispenza. I did a meditation called Changing Boxes. I did that to start. I lied on my penf mat over here. So
Yeah.
I had energies going through me at the same time I'm meditating. So I'm doing two things at once. I then wake up, I open up my app and I do my positive gratitude journal. And then I take out my old school journal, which is see, people say this shit and they don't really do it. Here's my look at this beautiful journal from Florence. Now you know what's
Beautiful.
amazing about this journal? This journal, I am down to the last two pages of it. And so this journal has 5 years.
Oh, wow. It's
And
beautiful.
s-
I see no
and
line. I'm a no lines journal too.
no, this journal has lines. I can't write in a
Yes.
journal without lines.
See,
I have to have lines. And
I
um
lines.
and I so I get it out on paper in the morning. And then normally I go for a walk. I'm doing my walk after we're done. I'll go do my walk. And I'll eat the right things in the morning and I'll take my vitamins and then I'll try to have a connection time with a friend. Which by the way, you can still have a shitty day, but those things help. If you stack all those things on top of each other,
Tell me, do you believe in karma? I mean, I know you to be a very generous person. Do you believe in karma? Do you believe because people have a funny relationship to that. What's yours?
I beyond 100% believe in karma. I believe, and so you go, how do you live your life? I think everything that you put out comes back. That's also why I have a hard time when people are putting out. You have to be very careful what you say because what you say the universe hears. So you have to be intentional about your words. You have to be intentional about your thoughts. What do you want? Because if you tell the world what you want, the world will bring. The world is designed to bring it to you. And I'm dealing with a health issue right now. I'm having a problem with acid reflux, silent acid reflux. I had a rebound on this. I've been better for 3 years. It hit me in Verbier. I'm back on PPIs, which is anybody who knows these drugs reduces the cough. In my case, coughing, but horrible for your system. Working on putting into the world right now. This is kind of like going to your karma question. Like, don't focus on the disease, focus on the healing. Right. I'm in the new journey now of learning how to re-heal my body versus have this thing. But I think karma, I just believe what you put out comes back. And so, we all have our bad moments. I am not the perfect person. But I know if I put out love, more love comes back in my life. And when I have those moments that I don't put out love, where you've gotten frustrated with someone, um, I know spiritually that that's not good because it comes back to me. like, and so, and I've had to learn that the person that I've always been most difficult on is myself, right? Because we're always the hardest on ourselves. So I've had to also learn how to be the karma of loving yourself. Don't speak negatively about yourself. Don't judge yourself harder than other people would judge you. You're supposed to love yourself more than other people would love you. So I
David,
work on that too.
what's the best thing you tell yourself?
I love you. I'll do this. I go to sleep. I go, I love you, David. I love you.
I love that.
I put my hands on my heart. I love you. I love you. You did a good job. Yeah. What's the best thing you tell yourself?
I say a few things. I say I'm guided, I'm safe, I'm connected, I'm worthy, I'm loved. But that feels like it's being filled up by, my connection to something greater. What I like about you is like it's you telling you.
Yeah.
That feels different. That's what I like about it. I want to talk a bit more about money. So most people think, that your books are about money. I don't know if they're really about money. So I want to sort of dive into what do you really think the gift of these books are? Like, was the intention to write books about money?
No, actually. So what I think is, I think we're all put here for a reason, and I think I was put here for a reason. I think my reason I was put here is to free people financially. The reason I was put here to free people financially, I believe, is that when you free people financially, you allow them to hear their God-given talents and gifts. I think God has put everybody into all of us out there with gifts. And I think what happens is if you're living paycheck to paycheck, if you're struggling financially, if you're drowning in debt, if you're worried at the moment you wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning, the first thought is money. It's very hard to hear the word, I think, often the word of God and hear inside of you what you're meant to be here to do. And so I heard the word early and I was like, what I'm meant to do is free people financially so they can hear the grace of God, so they can hear their own soul speaking. And, if you go back to my original book, Smart Women Finish Rich and Smart Couples Finish Rich, they were based on what I do with my clients. And what I do with my clients at Morgan Stanley is I would talk to them about their values because my whole belief was that money is just here to serve you. And the way it should serve you is it should help you live your values. So what's most important to you? And I would talk to my clients about what's most important to you. Who do you want to be in? Who do you want to be in retirement? Not just what do you want to do, but who do you want to be? And what does that look like for you? And let's take your financial plan and your finances and let's make sure that the way you use your money is helping you be the person you want to be. And that was like a revolutionary concept 30 years ago. People are like, what? What do you mean you talk about values? And Smart One Finish Rich is all about how to lay out your values and how to then look at your dreams and make sure that the way you're spending and saving and investing helps that become real. And then with Smart Couples Finish Rich, I get to help couples do it together as a team. Because so often couples are just fighting about money constantly and they're in conflict about their finances. But when you get couples to focus on their values first, the financial decisions become much easier. So, as the books went along the journey, the readers took me on a journey too. Like a lot of readers were like, okay, this is great, but just tell me the one thing I need to do to be rich. And that's how the Automatic Millionaire came about because people were like, I like your books, David, but not everybody wants to read about life insurance and health insurance and values and gold. That's all great. Just tell me what I need to do to be rich, right? And that's how the Automatic Millionaire came to be. Because we're like, I just wanted the one thing I need to do to be wealthy. Oh, okay. Well, here it is. You got to make it automatic. You got to pay yourself first, make it automatic. And I went through basically the core things that need to be done to build your wealth. And then that book got launched on Oprah. And, you go back to God moments. I'm sitting behind the stage at Oprah and I literally like never been calmer in my entire life. I'm about to go on the biggest show of my life, launch the Automatic Millionaire book. And I sat backstage and I looked up at God and said, okay, you put me here to do your work. Today, give me the power and the grace, the confidence, the courage to deliver what you want me to deliver. And I got on stage totally calm. I was on stage for a while. Oprah didn't come right out. People don't know who's coming on the show, right? So they're like, "Oh my god, this is not the show that they're going to give all the free stuff away." The other person's like, I thought Brad Pitt was coming today. That's not Brad Pitt." And so they're like, "Okay, we're here to talk about how to become an automatic millionaire." And we had the greatest show, and that was a life changing show because it helped reach tens of millions of people. And then that took my whole journey into the stratosphere in many ways.
Funny, I also, when I'm backstage before big shows, big speaking events, I keynoted the Oprah conference. I also go into, think into my thoughts, speak into my words, act into my actions. And I sort of let myself be a little bit taken over, where I go, okay, you know, whatever is going to come through is going to come through, instead of kind of having it all sort of in the mind. So it's interesting to just to hear your practice around what creates calmness, because typically those things would create an enormous amount of nerves and stress and adrenaline. And what I hear is that when those moments show up, you do go to a much deeper place of guidance. And just knowing that you're a team in some ways, you're never really alone kind of doing these things. Do you
So
think,
wait. I'm going to interrupt you for a second so I don't forget this story, and then ask the question. I'm sorry. So I go on Oprah. The book is number one in the U.S. I think it's number one in Canada. It's just, and it's just staying on the New York Times bestseller list. I mean, it just absolutely rocks. And now I'm doing big keynotes, and so I go on stage in an event in Canada. I don't know. There's maybe 10,000 people in the room, and it's the first time I deliver the Automatic Millionaire speech. And it's the first time I've been on a stage. It's so large. The room's so large that everything's black. I've always been in rooms of 500,000 people. You can see everybody in the audience. I can see if what I'm saying is working. And I'm in this huge coliseum, and when it's over, I'm like, I just completely I just bombed the speech. That's what I'm telling myself. I just bombed this speech, and I walk off the stage, and I'm like, that's it. You're not doing this again. That was a disaster. And I'm so upset. This is all in my mind. I am so upset that by accident, instead of going truly through the backstage, I go through the front stage again. I go through the curtains. I turn right instead of left, and I'm back on the stage. And everybody sees me because there's now an intermission, and they stage rush me, which I've never had happen before. And there are hundreds of people holding their copy of the Automatic Millionaire book, and I just sit on the stage and I start signing books, and people are like, "Thank you," and they're signing books, and people are taking pictures. And then this one gentleman comes up, and he's like, "Can I hug you?" And I'm like, "Sure." And he starts sobbing, and he says, "I just want you to know you just saved my life. I have two little boys, and I came to this event." This was a big motivational event. It wasn't just me speaking. I came to the event hoping I could find something, because my intention was to take my life at the end of today. And you just saved my life. And he says, "Thank you." And he walks off after hugging me. And people are like, he has your book. And they're like running to go give him the book. And at this point, my assistant has no idea where I've gone. She's lost me. Then she realizes I'm back in the front of the stage, right? So she comes out and she's like, "What's going on?" And so I sign all those books, and I start walking backstage again. And I'm like in that, behind the scenes alley that you're all when you're in big stadiums by yourself. And she says, "What just happened?" And I said, I'll tell you later. And I swear, I hear this voice says to me, "Just do the work and let me be the judge. Just do the work and let me be the judge." And I was like, "Okay, I get it." And I actually bent over and I put my hands on me and said, "Did you hear that?" She's like, "What?" I'm like, "Okay, I'll tell you later." I was like, just do the work and let me be the judge." And So I kept doing the work. I kept doing the work. Now doing this another 20 some odd years since that day. How do you explain that? I need to hear again. What am I supposed to do now?
Have you been asking?
Probably not enough. You know? Yeah.
I know when I've had moments where I haven't known what's next, I just say the three words, show me the way, show me the way, show me the way, show me the way.
I
So
like that.
I don't do it as a question, and and you are shown the way. You get green lights, red lights. We don't like the red lights, but they're red lights. But I just say, show me the way, and then a person shows up, or an idea shows up, or a dream shows up, or a book shows up. But when I ask, I'm definitely shown. And it's a
That's
treasure hunt.
beautiful. I like that. Show me
It's
the
a
way.
it's a treasure hunt, and it's like a guidance map, and it's sort of like now I'm looking, now I'm paying attention instead of being lost in the mind. So those
What
are
was it that showed you the way to decide to do this show?
it's a nice question. I've had it in my heart for probably 3 or 4 years. In different ways, I mean, I was podcasting 15 years ago, so I knew I loved it. I knew I loved connecting with people at a different level. The questions come to me, right, while we're in the conversation from a higher source. I felt like I've been missing that for the last few years. I do a lot of one-on-one work with people, as you know, but not in the same context. And I felt like I was ready, and I was ready to integrate the two worlds of success and spirituality. I didn't have the name. I was asking for it. I had lots of other names for the show. A Foot in Both Worlds was another one. But then I kind of go, I have to explain what these worlds are. And I got very intentional, and I was like, you really, really need to show me what the name of the show is and who I want as my first few friendly guests, you being one of them, where I'm allowed to mess up and be messy, and it doesn't have to be perfect in any way. One of the questions I wanted to ask you a few minutes ago was, is there a connection between wealth and spirituality? Is there a connection between making money and these practices, these conversations, these more internal feelings? Because a lot of people would be like, some of the richest people in the world probably don't have this, and some you'll be surprised because they might not have spoken about it. um is there a connection? Is there no connection?
I can answer this both ways. So some of these stories I'm telling don't seem believable, but they're just the truth. Like when I wrote The Automatic Millionaire, the book was done. I'd finished it. And then I had a dream in the middle of the night. I woke up at like 3:30 in the morning. I was living in New York, in Soho, in my apartment, book's finished. And I wake up, I had this whole dream that the book has to end on tithing. I'm like, tithing? There was nowhere in my book proposal, my outline, nothing about tithing. And I have this dream that I have to end the book on giving back. So I wake up, I get out of bed, I go to my computer, and I start researching tithing and giving back. And I'm like, I have to end the book on giving back automatically. And I came back to a memory that I had, Tony Robbins event, where he had John Templeton on video. And John Templeton talked about the fact that the secret to life is not being a go-getter, but a go-giver. And he talked about how when he was, he was a billionaire, but when had no money, he was giving 50% of his paycheck to charity, him and his wife. And then he talked, so he was thinking $50, we giving half of it to charity. And he was saying, the whole secret to life is giving back. Go be a go-giver. And so I decided to end the book because I had that spiritual moment of like, I have to end the book on giving back automatically, which is what I did. So, I think there is absolutely a spiritual element back to karma because, John Tim was like, it's like a magic pill. Like the common denominator among people who've been extremely successful financially is that they give back. And so I think there's something that happens energy wise when you make money and you pay yourself first automatically, but then you also give money back automatically, I think that energy compounds. And I really believe that. Now that's one thing that I believe to be true. The second thing I believe to be true is this: money doesn't know you. Money is actually just math. Like people spend a lot of time on their money trauma and the psychology of money, and you were raised this way, and because of that you do this and you do that. Great. Just pay yourself first, 1 hour a day of your income automatically for life, starting in your 20s, and you'll never have to worry about money again. You can spend less than you make, and you have to save 1 hour a day of your income automatically. And you don't have to be a spiritual person, and you'll be financially well off. So money's just math. Now, there's meaning behind money, there's movement behind money, there's there's all kinds of mystic things that happen as a result of having money. But at the end of the day, it's just basic math. If you make $1 and you spend $1.10, you'll be broke. If you make $1 and you spend $1, you'll be broke. People make more money every single year. I'll get in front of an audience and they'll be like, how many of you make more money than you did 10 years ago? Everyone raises their hand. Amazing. So you guys are all rich now, right? Everybody laughs. No, because society is designed that the more you make, the more you spend. And the more you have, the more you want. So that's a whole nother spiritual conversation, because learning how to want less and be more can change your whole life financially. And because we're here for a limited period of time, if you don't learn how to get out of the rat race, you will, it's a great quote, you'll always be a rat. And I think, one thing I try to, I say to my kids, like, look, you just got to figure out how to do you. Do you looks different for everybody. There's a gentleman that I skied with in Verbier who's been there for 30 years. Started life as a ski bum, and he's now had a 30-year career in Verbier. He's got his own ski instructor business, and he's got a construction business, and he's lives a beautiful life in Verbier. And we've had this conversation about the fact that, like, he'll have all these wealthy people come, and he'll guide them for 2 or 3 days, and some of them are billionaires, and they're like, they're on their phone constantly, and they've got to leave at 1 o'clock to go get on a Zoom call. And so who won the race? I don't know. It's all relative. I think he's got a pretty great life. Like, it's figuring out who do you want to be? What do you want to do with your life?
Why do you think so many very successful and financially wealthy people are still unhappy?
Because it doesn't actually bring you happiness. Success doesn't bring you happiness. The finish line doesn't bring you happiness. It brings you happiness for a little period of time, right? So work on a business. I've got this goal. I'm going to sell this business. Once I sell it for this, then it's the when then deal that we all do. When I graduate college, when I'm married, when I have this job, when I get this title, when I have this, we think the thing is the thing. It's not the thing. It's this whole journey that we're doing in between what we think we want and getting to the thing. Because the moment we get the thing, then our brains are designed to want to go figure out the next thing. Like, look, what do I want to go do for the next 10 years of my life? I have all the things. Like, and that's part of the spiritual journey too. But money makes life easier. Do not get me wrong. The financial security and financial freedom is a beautiful gift, especially when it's earned, not given, but it's earned, right? People who have earned their wealth tend to be much happier than people who just simply inherit their wealth. But simply having a dollar amount in the bank, I mean, we know a lot of people who have a lot of money and they're not happy. And that's a shame. And actually what I've seen is some of the most unhappy people are often just insanely successful. And the reason they're so unhappy is they thought, once I have the plane, once I have the Ferrari, once I have the building with my name on it, then I'm no longer going to feel like the little boy who didn't have all the things he wanted. And then they get the things they want, and that feeling inside of them didn't change. So that's then often where you go on the spiritual journey of, like, what is going to fill me up?
it's interesting that you also ended with tithing and generosity, because when I was meditating in some ways to receive the right questions for you this morning, I had a few planned, but I had ask him about karma, ask him about generosity, ask him about children, and what is the next generation, the message to the next generation. Um, and then I also just got the question around, what do you feel after all the external success that you've had and all the internal, beauty that you have on the inside? What do you feel has been the bridge between the two? What has been sort of the connection point? What has been, yeah, either the phrase that you tell yourself, the belief that you have, the one practice that you have, where it's like this holds it all together?
The answer is I chose to make my life be about service. When I look at why do I over on most days I'm very fulfilled, right? On most days I'm like, I think I've done a pretty good job. I feel like I've done a good job because I know my life has been a service. I know that I've really dedicated 3 full decades of my life, 33 years, to trying to help people. And I get to hear from people every day, right? Like I open up my phone and there's just people thanking me for how much they saw me on Oprah and they bought the book, and now their whole life 25 years later is different. And I get to hear from people all the time like that. And because time's gone on and I've done this for so long, the success stories just have compounded and compounded and compounded. So I'm lucky because I get that external validation and reward. If you get every day, it's like a hit. It's like, oh wow, there's another person I helped. And so that's kind of been the gift that keeps on giving. It's also been the gift that's kept me motivated to keep going. Um, and I think that I was really lucky in that regard. I think I'm lucky that I made the difficult decisions to spend my life being of service. I could have been at Morgan Stanley working with 100 wealthy families, which probably today would be 50 wealthy families, because what happens is you just work with wealthy and wealthier families and you take fewer and fewer clients. That could have been the rest of my life. And I was like, I think I want to go help millions of people. And so that decision made all the difference. Um, so for me, it was service.
It's beautiful. Thank you, David. Thank you for who you are, you've been. Thank you for your friendship, your guidance towards my son. Um, yeah, I feel very blessed, and I feel so excited for other people to hear just your open heartedness in sharing these stories. You didn't have to do it, but my intention and my hope was that we did create the space for this. And yeah, thank you for taking up that space. Thank you for being an example for others. Thank you for the work you have done in the world, and I'm cheering you on and excited for what's next.
Well, thank you. And I salute you on doing this. It's one thing to have an idea, it's another thing to now go and do it. So bravo to you. Thank you for being together with me in Verbier. Some amazing ski days. I hope, God willing, we get to do it again next year.
We will. God bless. Thank you, David. If this conversation moved you or inspired you, please follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if it really moved you, please leave us a 5-star review. It really does make a big difference. And finally, if someone came to mind while you were listening to this episode, please send it their way. Remember, new episodes drop weekly. I'll see you very soon.